Galw'r aelodau I drefn. Yr eitem gyntaf yn agenda ni yw'r cwestiynau prif weinidog, ac mae'r cwestiwn gyntaf gan Llyr Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Anaiff y prif weinidog datganiad am effaith Brexit ar addysg bellach ac uwch.
Roedd yn papur gwyn diogelu dyfodol Cymru yn rhoi sylw I effaith Brexit ar addysg ôl-orfodol ac yn nodi blaenoriaethau ar gyfer y trafodaethau. Ni'n parhau I bwyso am y blaenoriaethau hyn mewn trafodaethau gyda swyddogion Llywodraeth Senedd.
Last week, in answer to the Plaid Cymru leader here in the Assembly, you told us that you and your government had no plans for the Welsh NHS if there was to be, as is of course increasingly likely now, a no-deal Brexit. In fact, your exact words were, there's no planning for a no-deal Brexit. It's more like people running around in circles screaming. There are no plans at all for it. Now, I'm not sure that's the kind of leadership that the people of Wales expected from somebody who stood on a promise of standing up for Wales. But if you have no plan for the NHS, could you tell us whether that's also the case for Welsh universities and Welsh colleges in the face of a no-deal Brexit? And if it is, when exactly would you expect the HE and FE sector to start running around in circles screaming?
Well, the member's been mischievous. He knows full well I was referring to the UK government and not the Welsh government, as he knows, but there's the mischief. But he asked a question, what is the situation in terms of what we've done? Well, we have the European Advisory Group bringing together business leaders, representatives from universities, trades unions, agriculture, public services, politicians and the third sector. We have a higher education Brexit working group with senior representatives from the HE and FE sectors. They are providing us with advice on the implications of Brexit for the higher education sector. We have the Council for Economic Renewal Brexit subgroup with senior business leaders and organisations chaired by the Economy Secretary. We have the Environment and Rural Affairs Brexit Roundtable Stakeholder Group set up after the referendum. That is a forum for engagement and collaboration between the Welsh Government and the food, fisheries, farming, forestry and environment sectors. And he mentioned health. Well, we continue to work with key health and care stakeholders through the main representative bodies, and we're also working directly with specific groups such as Public Health Wales, the RCN and NHS medical directors in order for us to understand from them what their challenges are.
Mark Reckless.
But will the First Minister and his party get behind a deal with the EU on education or anything else? I mean, at Chequers, the Prime Minister went a long way towards the sort of Brexit that Labour claims to want. But instead of welcoming that, they say they'll vote down any deal based on it to try and get a general election instead. Since that approach may lead to our leaving the EU without a deal, will you as First Minister now support the UK Government in accelerating preparations for such an outcome?
Well, Boris Johnson and David Davis stood behind the Prime Minister with a knife. And we all saw what they did. I mean, really, this is not the strongest ground for his party to lead on, given the incredible divisions that exist within the Conservative Party. Now, in terms of what the Prime Minister is trying to do, she is trying, I hope, to steer the UK towards a soft Brexit. In that, I will support that general principle, but we need to see more detail. We don't know yet what will be in the Trade White Paper. It hasn't been shared with us in its entirety. We don't know what the detail will be. We don't know what the view of the EU will be, but what is absolutely clear is this, that the Conservative Party is absolutely divided. The resignation of two senior cabinet secretaries in the space of one day is, well, hasn't happened since 1979, I understand, and that shows the depth of the division that exists in Whitehall. It's time, really, for the Conservative Party to get a grip and show some leadership for this country.
Brown.
Thank you. First Minister, the UK has 3 universities in the global top 10. The rest of the EU has none. They're not even in the top 30. Has the First Minister made any assessment of the impact on EU students, government and non-governmental agencies and organisations, such as the European Space Agency, were they to lose access to our world-leading academics and educational institutions?
I don't think it works for anybody. I think the first thing that academics will tell you is they rely absolutely entirely on the ability to work in different universities around the world. And if the UK is seen as self-contained, that will be to the UK's detriment. If it's seen as unwelcoming, that will be to the UK's detriment. It's absolutely essential that cooperation continues in the future, with schemes such as Erasmus and Horizon 2020 being able to deliver to their fullest extent.
Cwestiwn 2, Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister provide an update on the Welsh Government's plans to improve the welfare of companion animals in Cynon Valley?
Yes, the Wales Animal Health and Welfare Framework Implementation Plan sets out our priorities for animal health and welfare, and I know that the Cabinet Secretary set out plans to maintain and improve companion animal welfare in Wales in her oral statement on the 21st of June.
Thank you, First Minister. Tomorrow, with my colleague Eluned Morgan, I am co-sponsoring an event to raise awareness of how Lucy's Law could improve animal welfare by ensuring people only get puppies from rescue centres or reputable breeders, and I'd encourage all AMs to come along. Tackling puppy farming is crucial, and many of my constituents have suffered the heartbreak of paying hundreds of pounds for a poorly pup that was bred in unacceptable conditions. During her statement on animal welfare, the Cabinet Secretary said that getting a puppy from the right source is the first fundamental step towards being a responsible owner. So how is the Welsh Government promoting this, and when can we expect an update on discussions on introducing a ban on third-party sales?
Well, the updated welfare code for dogs will be laid before the Assembly before the summer recess, and it will remind owners of their responsibilities when looking after and sourcing their dog or puppy. Regarding the specific issue of third-party sales, I know the Cabinet Secretary is attending the Lucy's Law event on Wednesday, and I'm sure this will help to inform those discussions with her. I will ask for a written statement to be published to update members on developments as they progress.
Andrew Otley-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I do be privileged today to be sitting next to the rescue of the Hedgehog Fancier Club here, Darren Miller. Anyone who's followed his Twitter feed would see what the rescue mission he launched last week. But I would ask you, First Minister, the Welsh Government commissioned many services in the public sector, obviously, bus services and regulation of taxis. It is important that when people with companion dogs in particular seek to use those services, there is an understanding of the operators what their obligations are, and they are not turned away from use of those services. How confident are you that the regulations, and in particular the services you commission, do have the safeguards in place so that people who do need guide dogs and other companion animals are able to access those public services?
Well, of course, all operators are required to operate within the boundaries of the law, particularly the Disability Discrimination Act. I would expect every operator to ensure that where somebody needs the assistance of a guide dog, for example, they're able to access bus services, train services and any other service. That is what the law would expect them to do, and that's what I think decent standards would expect them to do as well.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau, arweinydd grŵp UKIP, Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, the UK Government is in turmoil and apparently determined to make such a complete hash of Brexit that we have no choice but to remain in the EU, despite the wishes of UK voters. David Cameron abandoned the UK, unwilling to carry out the democratic wishes of the electorate. Theresa May has bungled every negotiation with the EU, and senior Tory ministers are more interested in looking at their leadership chances than the fate of our country. And this has now all reached a crescendo with a plan for Brexit that doesn't deliver Brexit. The Chequers proposals mean that we continue to be subject to EU laws, unable to alter or influence them. We would be unable to conduct independent trade policies, hampering our ability to negotiate trade deals outside the EU. This would leave us subject to EU and ECJ rules and be forced to take rules that benefit our continental competitors. This is not what I voted for and not what the majority of UK voters voted for. Out means out. First Minister, do you support the position taken by the Chequers Agreement, or do you agree with me that it's such a shambolic deal that it's back to the drawing board?
I don't agree with either. I think what we need is a sensible solution that sees us staying in the customs union with full and unfettered access to the single market. And above all else, she is right. The UK government is in turmoil. That's why we need a Labour government in Whitehall.
First Minister, unfortunately, the Labour Party position is confusing. The Labour MP for Aberavon strongly believes Labour should commit wholeheartedly to a Brexit model that would see the UK continue to make financial contributions to the EU and accept many of its laws. The Labour leader in Westminster clearly isn't sure what he wants. And one day it is we need to remain in the single market and the customs union, and the next is to obtain a tariff-free trade relationship with Europe that we develop a customs union to go alongside that. And the Shadow Cabinet has more resignations than appointments. And the Shadow Brexit Secretary is now calling for a second referendum, seemingly influenced by key members of the Unite Union. First Minister, what is your party's position on Brexit? Is the position you outlined with the leader of Plaid Cymru, is that what it is, or is your stance or your Labour Party's stance, please?
The former.
Sorry?
Caroline Jones.
Back again, is it? No answer. Okay. Sorry?
He did answer and say...
With Plaid Cymru. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Thank you, First Minister. I note that your government has today outlined proposals for farm subsidies should we ever leave the EU. And I welcome the proposals, which, according to the RSPB, signals a new way of working. So the Common Agricultural Policy has pitted conservationists and farmers against one another in the battle for land. So this will end this approach. So according to your Cabinet Secretary, Brexit presents a unique opportunity to put in place bespoke Welsh policy, which delivers for our economy, society and natural environment. And I agree wholeheartedly with this statement. So, First Minister, we are clearly not going to be able to influence the Brexit negotiations with the UK government, which will simply ignore our views, but we can seek to capitalise on the opportunities presented by our exit from the EU. So bespoke agriculture and conservation policies, bespoke fisheries policies and bespoke trade policies. So First Minister, do you agree that it's now time to focus on the opportunities ahead of us and open to us, rather than playing up the risks? And after all, we were supposed to be in a deep recession by now, but instead business investment is booming. So which should go some way to giving positive vibes to potential investors. So how will you encourage investment into Wales, please? Thank you.
First of all, I mean, it is quite clear that many businesses are concerned about the prospect of a hard Brexit. We've heard Airbus say it, we've heard JLR say it, and heard others say it. For them, a hard Brexit doesn't work. It is right to say that we have an opportunity to shape farming policy as we would want, subject, of course, to there being a commonly agreed framework, which is important across the whole of the UK, and money. The reality is we have no guarantees of the money. £260 million a year goes into farming subsidies in Wales. We can't find that money. I can say that now. It's impossible. It has to be set aside, to my mind, in a separate pot by the UK government and distributed as it is now until there's agreement to change things. And that's hugely important. But none of this means anything without a market. And the reality is 90% of our food and drink exports go to the single market. And geography dictates that. A lot of what we produce, I mean, if we look at fish, for example, it's perishable. It's just easier to sell it in the European market than it is to take it halfway across the world to another market. So the reality is, yes, we can look at producing a better deal for our farmers in Wales, as long as the money is there from Westminster. But none of this means anything unless they can sell their produce, unless they can get fish and perishable produce, for example, across through Dover into the French ports as quickly as possible. They can't sell anything, which is why it's hugely important that we avoid a hard Brexit.
Rwynydd Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, it's on the record that you said everyone is running around screaming when I asked you last week what your plan is for a no-deal Brexit. Westminster is in chaos, and leaving the EU without a deal now looks more likely than ever. So will you now commit to developing a no-deal plan to protect Welsh jobs, wages and the opportunities of future generations?
Well, I can just answer that question. There is no mitigation against no deal. It would not be right to say that. The reality is, if we have a no-deal Brexit, we will lose jobs, we will lose investment. There's no question about that, which is why I have fought tooth and nail against a no-deal Brexit. That does not mean, of course, we're not doing anything in terms of preparing for Brexit. You'll have heard me say earlier on what we have been doing. We also have put in place, of course, the EU Transition Fund, £50 million that helps businesses, public services and other organisations to plan for and prepare for the impact of Brexit. So, yes, we have a number of groups where we are talking to stakeholders. We also have money on the table. But surely nobody can pretend that a no-deal Brexit can be fully mitigated, because it can't.
Minister, I think we can all agree that the Westminster Government is making a right mess of Brexit, and the position is so weak. Last week, Plaid Cymru, it wasn't Plaid Cymru that consented to Westminster's flagship Brexit bill, was it? And it wasn't Plaid Cymru that abstained on the votes that could have kept us in the single market, and it wasn't Plaid Cymru that voted to trigger Article 50 without a plan. First Minister, that was the Labour Party that did all those things. No input and not even sight of Westminster's Brexit paper. Now, is this what the Finance Secretary meant when he said that his deal with the Conservatives marked, and I quote, a significant step towards equitable intergovernmental working? Or, in hindsight, was your government wrong to consent to the EU withdrawal bill, which will help to further the chaos that we're already seeing in Westminster?
In terms of what she said about this being an important step to intergovernmental cooperation, I believe that Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister, said the same thing. So, yes, it is an important step, but obviously there are different positions taken by the Scottish and Welsh governments. The reality is, I can't answer for what happens in Westminster. I'm the First Minister of Wales, and she will know, working with her party, we have developed what I think are the most thought-through and sensible policies of anywhere in the UK. We have worked through policies working with her party that provide for, yes, the delivery of the referendum result, but also a soft Brexit, a sensible trade policy, sensible relationships with the EU, full unfettered access to the single market. All these things we've shared together, and we are continuing to press the UK government. And it seems, we hope that they are listening to an extent, given that the Chequers Agreement goes much further towards where we think the UK should be than has previously been the case.
How can you expect the UK government to listen to what we jointly want when you can't even get your own party to accept that position? Your MPs vote against the joint agreed position that your party and my party have agreed in this Assembly. First Minister, we face uncertainty here like we've never faced it before. Within just weeks of negotiating time left and Westminster in more chaos than ever, why do you refuse to accept reality? A no-deal Brexit is looming over us, and I don't think your government is doing anywhere near enough to protect this nation. Now, as a Democrat, I believe that people should have a say on the final deal. So, First Minister, now that we know that it looks like either a bad deal or a no deal, will you now back a people's vote so that we can have a chance to reject the extreme Brexit that you and I know will cause so much damage to the people and the economy of this country?
Well, my view has always been that any deal should be ratified by the Parliaments, plural, of the UK. If that doesn't happen, the matter would have to be settled through an election or indeed possibly by a referendum on the deal itself. Because if there's no other way of resolving it, then the people who voted in 2016 have a perfect right to decide what kind of deal they want to approve from 2018 onwards. It seems right that that should happen. But it seems to me the first port of call is for the parliaments of the UK to examine any deal and decide whether that deal should be supported or not. If there is then, for example, a general election, if that deal is rejected and that proves an inconclusive result, well, how else can it be resolved other than by a referendum on the deal? I think that it becomes inevitable at that stage.
Paul Davis.
First Minister, what is the Welsh Government doing to support children and young people with learning disabilities?
Well, we have done a great deal, as he will know. For example, the fact that we have we've helped local authorities in terms of providing services for care for children. The fact, for example, that we've put so much money into to CAMS, where so many young people have had benefit of the £8 million extra we've given to CAMS. Of course, we have the Children's Commissioner there who is able to advise us in terms of what more we might need to do.
Well, First Minister, you'll be aware of the very worrying report published by the Children's Commissioner for Wales, which showed that on a number of counts, the Welsh Government is failing to deliver the support needed for children and young people with learning disabilities. The report showed that 83% of parents surveyed said they were worried their children were socially isolated, and many highlighted concerns about bullying. First Minister, in light of this damning report, can you tell us what immediate action the Welsh Government will now take to address the concerns highlighted by the Children's Commissioner and support children and young people with learning disabilities?
Well, it's hugely important with a report like this that there is a proper response given by government, and that response will be given, of course, and consideration given what the Children's Commissioner has actually said.
First Minister, the Welsh Government has already committed to upholding the rights of children and young people across Wales, and yet we have seen a number of recent reports in recent months where the Welsh Government is failing children and young people. Of course, one way the Welsh Government could better support children and young people and uphold their rights is by supporting my proposed autism bill, which has indeed the backing of independent bodies such as the National Autistic Society and the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and is supported by many in this chamber. First Minister, will you now therefore commit to supporting the autism bill, which will actually send a clear message to children and young people across Wales that the Welsh Government will do all that it can to support them?
We will do all that we can to support parents and indeed young people with autism. That does not necessarily mean it has to be done via a bill. It's hugely important the resources are made available, and we have done that in terms of support. It's also hugely important that we are able to work with organisations to deliver the best package for young people with autism. So we're unconvinced that a bill would do it, but it's hugely important that we look to see what further resource can be identified in order to help those people who live with the condition every day.
Question 3, Neil Hamilton.
To make a statement on how the Welsh Government facilitates outdoor leisure activities in Wales.
We work closely with a number of partners, including Sport Wales and Natural Resources Wales, to provide opportunities for people of all ages to participate in a range of outdoor leisure activities. It's important that we make use of our natural landscape to encourage people to become more active.
I thank the First Minister for that response. A constituent who's a keen off-road cyclist has written to me from Kidwelly to complain that there's a large area of land near Merthyr Tydfil, which is owned by Natural Resources Wales, has been leased to a private company and trades under the name Bike Park Wales, as a result of which there's been a restriction on public access to that land. And I looked at the Bike Park Wales' website this morning, which says any rider caught trespassing on the trails without a valid pass will be fined on the spot, and this will be enforced by our marshals, a rather dictatorial attitude to take in these circumstances. Can the First Minister tell me what's the policy on public access of the Welsh Government-owned land for the purposes of cycling and walking, and how this new policy of privatisation might affect the Active Wales initiative by banning local people from free and unrestricted access?
Well, I'm not aware of the area of land he's talking about, but certainly I cannot see any legal way in which people can have money extorted from them simply because they're standing on a piece of land. I can't see any way where that can be enforced in any lawful way. But if the member writes to me with more details, I will, of course, be pleased to look at this in more detail.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, at the same time that Santander's sponsored community bike scheme has finally come to life, we're really pleased about that, and there are more and more cycle tracks becoming apparent in Swansea. The local authority had planned to dig up a much-loved and well-used tennis court in Mumbles and replace them with a temporary car park. And at least the Swansea Council did listen to residents' complaints about this and have withdrawn their plans for now. At a time when we're trying to get people out of their cars and we have the active travel agenda, as we've just heard, we want people visiting Wales, some of our most important tourism spots. I think this was a bit of a strange and muddled plan from Swansea Council. So do you agree that at a time when the city region is bringing councils together to think big picture about what the regeneration of the area, that they should be looking at active travel in exactly the same way and avoiding short-sighted decisions like this, which actually reduce the opportunities for people to take part in activity?
Well, that would be a matter for Swansea Council, but we do expect, of course, local authorities to comply with the Active Travel Act and to look for opportunities to ensure more people are able to cycle and cycle safely. I'm not familiar with the particular planning issue that the member talks about, but I can assure her that it's the view of the government that we want to see more opportunities arise for cycling and walking in the future.
Cwestiwn 4, Russell George.
Beg your pardon.
George Flywydd, will the First Minister make a statement on eligibility to vote in Welsh elections?
Yes, to be eligible to vote in Welsh elections, you need to be registered and 18 years of age or over on polling day. I do intend, however, to support the bid to extend the franchise to include 16 and 17-year-olds.
Thank you, First Minister. I've been contacted by a former constituent who's written to me to say that he feels disenfranchised at not being able to vote in Welsh elections. He was born in Wales and raised locally, has extensive family in Mid-Wales. He moved from Mid-Wales to Shropshire, where his job took him, and then went to work abroad. Now, in contacting the election office in Paris, they've advised him that as an overseas resident, he can only register to vote where he last lived. So as a Welsh national, he is able to vote in a UK general election, but he can't vote in a Welsh general election. So this does seem to me to be an anomaly. And can I ask if you are aware of this issue, and if you are, has the Welsh Government and could the Welsh Government make representation to the Electoral Commission?
I think that's very difficult. I mean, there are two ways in which you can establish someone's right to vote. One is residence, obviously. The other is citizenship. We don't have Welsh citizenship. There are some in the Chamber, I know, who would seek to promote that. But there is, in the absence of Welsh citizenship, residence is the only way of doing it. And the question then is, how far back do you go? What if someone lives in Wales for a week or two? Does that mean they're eligible? I think there are lots of difficulties there that would need to be resolved in order for a change in the law to be workable.
Jane Hutt.
First Minister, would you agree with the expert panel on Assembly electoral reform that a reduction in the minimum voting age to 16 would be a powerful way to raise political awareness and participation among young people?
Yes, I would. And I have to say, we have seen one electoral event in the UK, namely the Scottish referendum, where 16 and 17-year-olds were allowed to vote. Now, that precedent having been established, I fail to see why that can't operate in the future for elections and referenda. It seemed to work very well in Scotland. The turnout seemed to be very good amongst those who are 16 and 17-year-olds, showing that they were engaged, one side or the other, in the issues in 2014. That's why I'm supportive of lowering the voting age to 16.
Cwestiwn 5, Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on Greenbelt developments in South Wales Central?
Yes, the local planning authorities within the South Wales Central region haven't designated green belts in their respective local development plans.
Yes, thanks for that answer. We've had recent press reports that the leader of Cardiff Council, Hugh Thomas, wants to merge with the Vale of Glamorgan Council, principally so Cardiff can build more houses on land in the Vale. We've already had housing developments infringing on the green belt, and we're losing prime agricultural land due to this. Do you agree, First Minister, that Cardiff Council's bid to turn the Vale into a building site is not the way forward?
I'm sure he hasn't said that. I find it difficult that the Vale of Glamorgan Council would acquiesce to a merger along those lines. I don't think that Councillor Hugh Thomas has approached the Vale of Glamorgan and said, merge with us so that we can build on your land. It strikes me that's not the best example of diplomacy in those circumstances. No, I mean, there is a duty on all local authorities to maintain an LDP, of course, and it's good to see now that progress is being made in terms of the development of a strategic development plan as well to better manage the undoubted demand there is for housing.
David Melding.
First Minister, access to green spaces is really important. Today, 96% of Copenhageners live within a 15-minute walk of a sizable green or blue area, and work is indeed underway to even improve those access rates. The city has biodiversity volunteers who play a vital role in nurturing the city's green areas, and the city has planted more than 3,600 trees, many of them adopted by local people, companies or institutions. Do you agree with me that access to really pleasant green areas can be inside the city as well as just surrounding it?
No, absolutely. We're looking at the idea of green corridors to see how they can be developed in the future. We know that Cardiff, for example, is reasonably well blessed with parks, and the last thing we would want to see, for example, as the city grows, is to see developments without access to green spaces, without access to cycle paths, without access to to a rural environment. And that's hugely important in terms of well-being. For example, we know that the way people perceive their environment has a direct effect on their health and well-being, and that means it's hugely important not just to plan on the basis of let's build houses over there, but more let's create communities that are sustainable, that are easy to travel in and out of, and have access to green areas.
Neil McAvoy.
Diolch Llywyd. First Minister, in 2012 you denied announcing to the South Wales Echo that the green fields around Cardiff would be built on as part of Labour's so-called local development plan. Your Labour colleagues stood in the green fields, and I quote, "For the record, Labour does not want to build in Waterhall fields or on any green spaces." Now, those fields are now being built on, and the beautiful countryside around Danes Court will also be built on unless we can stop it. People in Cardiff were misled. Do you now accept that those green fields are being built on? And it's happening because Labour gave these massive housing corporations the permission to do it.
Well, his position's always been quite curious. I don't think I've ever announced anything to the Echo at any point in time. Secondly, I am not, nor have I ever been the leader of Cardiff City Council, and in 2012 I was not the planning minister. So I could not anyway give any kind of permission for development in Cardiff or anyone else in Wales. That's self-evident. But it is important that local authorities, of course, are able to try to manage the demand. The reality is that lots of people want to live in Cardiff. It's hugely important that the city is able to manage that demand, but also, of course, to work with authorities around Cardiff in order to manage the demand so people can live elsewhere as well. The idea that that local authorities should only plan for people who live and work in their own area is clearly ridiculous, because that's not the way it works in terms of the economy, and nor should it work in terms of the planning system, which is why SDPs are important.
Cwestiwn 6, Mohamed Ashka.
What action is the Welsh Government taking to improve services for asthma sufferers in Wales, please?
Yes, an updated respiratory health delivery plan for Wales was published in January. It sets out the approach to tackling respiratory disease over the next 12 months. And investment in respiratory care in Wales has increased from £338 million in 2009 to 10 to £432 million in 2016 to 17.
Thank you very much for the reply, Minister. The provision of a basic level of asthma care, as set out in the clinical guidelines, contributes to keeping sufferers out of hospital and ultimately to saving lives. According to Asthma UK, Wales is the worst place in the United Kingdom to be an asthma sufferer, with just over a quarter of people receiving every element of basic care, compared to over a third in England and nearly half in Northern Ireland. What action will your government take to improve services for asthma sufferers so that more people in Wales receive every element of basic care, please?
Well, the National Respiratory Implementation Group does obviously recognise the significance of asthma as an illness. It's put in place a national work stream and appointed a lead clinician for Wales to coordinate health board activity. Hugely important that patients receive a comprehensive asthma review. That is a priority for us. We are also looking to develop all Wales prescribing guidelines, paediatric asthma guidance, and the establishment of a difficult asthma group for the management of more complex cases. There's also a broader focus on the national review into asthma deaths and measurement of standards through the National Asthma and COPD Audit Programme.
Cwestiwn 7, Mark Isherwood.
What support does the Welsh Government provide for children with epilepsy?
Yes, the Neurological Conditions Delivery Plan for Wales sets out our expectations for the future delivery of safe, sustainable and high-quality care for people who have neurological conditions. That includes, of course, supporting children and young people with neurological conditions such as epilepsy.
Well, last week I hosted and chaired the Epilepsy Wales annual Epilepsy Aware event in the Assembly, and we heard that people with complex epilepsy were not being able to access treatment, including the keto diet, although recommended as a first-line treatment by NICE. And this included children with epilepsy after unsuccessfully trying two first-line drugs, which is also recommended by NICE, who have a GLUT1 diagnosis. How do you therefore respond to their call for provision within Wales of the necessary treatments and levels of care as outlined in the NICE guidelines, a ketogenic team and accepting the offer from the Daisy Garland Foundation to fund a dietitian in Wales for a year with immediate effect, alongside some other proposals in a list of ideas which would finally, if delivered in Wales, meet the needs of these people and, as they say, impact positively on the finances of the NHS.
Well, the member is quite correct to say that currently services for patients in South Wales who require access to support for a ketogenic diet are provided in Bristol. That is correct. The service can be accessed through an IPFR request, but I can say to the member that officials do know of discussions between Cardiff and Vale University Health Board and the Welsh Health Specialised Services about the possibility of those services now being provided more locally. So those issues are ongoing as far as South Wales is concerned, and I look forward to a positive outcome of those discussions to see whether we can actually provide the service closer to South Wales at the moment in time than is presently the case.
David Rees.
First Minister, I appreciate the treatments that we have talked about, but one of the big problems is actually getting a child who has a severe seizure to the hospital in the first place. I've got constituents who have phoned for ambulances. In fact, family who have lived over half an hour away got there before the ambulances got there. Now, a lone parent cannot take a child to the hospital with a child having a seizure in the back of a car. It's dangerous. They need the response from the ambulance quickly because the child sometimes starts breathing as a consequence of this. Will you ask your Health Secretary to look at the discussions with the ambulance service to ensure that for these type of children, they can get responses quickly so a parent doesn't have to see a child suffer whilst they wait for an ambulance?
Yes, the member will be aware, of course, about the assessment system to determine the clinical priority of a patient. The type of response sent to a child who's experienced a seizure will depend on the information provided by the person who's dialed 999, but I can say, in response to this particular concern, that the Chief Ambulance Services Commissioner is currently overseeing a review of the Amber category, which will make recommendations for improvement in the autumn, and it will be important that this issue that he has raised is part of the examination that's taking place at the moment.
Leanne Wood.
First Minister, while Mark Isherwood and myself might not see eye to eye on many political issues, we have worked closely together on the question of medicinal cannabis with the MS Society. So I wonder if I can ask, has an assessment been undertaken as to how many children in Wales have severe epilepsy, but could also benefit from the availability of cannabis oil, like Billy Caldwell? And will you also see that preparations are made to ensure that the NHS in Wales is prepared to meet the demand for medicinal cannabis and be prepared to prescribe it to patients if and when restrictions are relaxed by the UK government?
Well, it's difficult to provide a figure because it depends on the individual, of course, but she does ask an important question. This is tied up, as she will know, in the Misuse of Drugs Act, which is not devolved neither in Wales or in Scotland. So there are issues there that surround the ability of practitioners to prescribe drugs that are caught up in that act. We know that cannabis derivatives can play a role in treating some medical conditions. That's why Sativex, of course, is available in Wales. I can say that on the 18th of June, the Home Office Minister, Nick Hurd, assuming he is still the Home Office Minister, announced plans to establish an expert clinicians panel led by the UK CMO to advise ministers on any applications to prescribe cannabis-based medicines. That panel will consider the merits of each individual case and make a clinical assessment of an exceptional and unmet clinical need. Now, what is not clear to us at the moment is how that will affect us in terms of prescribing. However, the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer, Andrew Evans, is a non-voting member of the panel. So, even though we're talking about a devolved area, because the misuse of drugs isn't a devolved area, we need to make sure that restrictions are removed from London in order for us to be able to prescribe here in Wales. But I do hope that there's a proper examination of the possibilities of cannabis oil and what it might deliver for the welfare of some patients.
Cwestiwn 8, Rhina Biorwerth.
Diolch Llywydd. Be mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ei wneud i gefnogi prosiectau treftadaeth yn Ynys Môn?
Wel, mae Llywodraeth yn rannu cyfres o brosiectau treftadaeth ar Ynys Môn. Mae rheini yn amrywio o brosiectau cymunedol sy'n cynnwys nifer o wirfoddolwyr lleol, fel y rai yn Niwbwrch a Bryn Celli Ddu, i fuddsoddiadau mawr fel gwella gwasanaethau i ymwelwyr yng Nghastell Beaumaris.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Da ni fel pob etholaeth dwi'n gwybod yn falch iawn o'n treftadaeth. Mae yna nifer o gynlluniau cyffroes ar y gweill ar hyn o bryd i ail-agor tŵr Marcwys. Enghraifft yn Llanfairpwll Gwyngyll i ail-agor llinell dren Amlwch. A mae yna sawl cynllun eisoes yn gweithredu i ddathlu'n treftadaeth diwydiannol a threfnidiaeth. Dwi'n meddwl am y deyrnas Goper yn Amlwch a Parc y Morglawdd yng Nghaergybi. Ond un cynllun pwysig iawn arall ydy, ac yn un sy'n angen help Llywodraeth Cymru, ydy hwnnw i agor amgueddfa yn deud hanes y pontydd ymhir y tywysog ym Mhorthaethwy. Mi oedd yna ergyd i'r cynllun hwnnw yn ddiweddar pan glywodd yr ymddiriedolaeth nad oedden nhw'n gymwys am arian o raglen adeiladu ar gyfer y dyfodol. Rwan, dwi'n gobeithio y byddwch chi fel Prif Weinidog yn cytuno efo fi bod hwn yn amser da iawn i edrych ar fuddsoddi mewn amgueddfa o'r fath o ystyried y camau sy'n cael ei gymryd tuag at ddeioli y Pont Britannia, a mi fyddwn ni'n ddiolchgar iawn am air o gefnogaeth gennych chi fel Prif Weinidog. Y gallwch chi mewn cydweithrediad a'r gweinidog dros deftadaeth edrych ar bob modd posib arall o fuddsoddi yn y cynllun hwn fydda'n goron yn wir yn atblygiad diweddar tre Porthaethwy.
Wel, ni wastad wrth gwrs yn edrych i ei fuddsoddi mewn pan mae'r arian ar gael mewn prosiectau trydaddau sydd yn bwysig. Enghraifft, ni'n gwybod bod yw llys Rhosir a'r ffaith bod ni moyn sicrhau bod bobl yn mynd yn deall treftadaeth yr ardal a hanes yr ardal. Ond wrth gwrs, bydd unrhyw fath o bid yn goffod dod i'r Llywodraeth mwyn gweld am pa ffordd allan ni gefnogi'r bid yna.
Mark Ashwood?
Of course, Honestly, Anglesey is an incredible place and its history goes back a long way. How do you think we can incorporate into the promotion of that island the period when it was the Rome of the Druidic world? The fact that it was on the Roman imperial trading routes even before Rome conquered this island. Its wonderful Arthurian links and its links to the legends of Avalon and Avalac. The fact that it was occupied by the Vikings, or half of it was occupied by the Vikings for 2 centuries, and having a massive impact on local culture and dislocation at the time, and much more, aligned to the history we hear much more about as well.
Answer. If the member was taken by surprise by that question, he did a sterling job, I must say, of selling Anglesey as a result of what he has said. Well, it's hugely important for us to ensure that people visit all parts of Wales to understand the rich history that we have. I know, for example, if we talk about Llys Rhosir, which I mentioned earlier on, that the Minister is preparing, or Cadw rather, is preparing a leaflet at the request of the Minister on the castles and sites of the Lords and Princes of Wales, and that will include Llys Rhosir as well. Part of our history that I think has been neglected, actually, over the years, because we know that Welsh history was not well taught in schools for many, many years. In some ways, as a nation, we're not well aware of our own history. So all that we can do to encourage not just our own people, but others as well, to understand more of our medieval history, I think is something to be welcomed.
Nid yw'r unigol yma I ofyn cwestiwn 9, felly cwestiwn 10, Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on transport infrastructure projects across Wales?
Yes, the National Transport Finance Plan, last updated in 2017, sets out an ambitious programme of road, rail, bus and active travel improvements.
Thank you, First Minister. One of the schemes that the Welsh Government via the Vale of Glamorgan Council is promoting is the new road from the junction, the Miskin Junction as it's known in the Vale of Glamorgan to Sycamore Cross. Can the First Minister confirm that if this project is to go ahead, it will require Welsh Government funded money to be made available for its construction, and that money is within the budget as currently laid out?
Well, where we are at the moment is we allocated a £60,000 grant to the Council in 2017 to undertake an appraisal for the provision of those improvements. We commissioned Peter Brett Associates to assess the case for change for addressing connectivity issues for strategic employment sites in the Vale. Things are at a very, very early stage at the moment. I understand the Council itself has extended the consultation until the 17th of July. So any comments, of course, should be directed to the Council. But inevitably, it would be, if it was to move ahead, it would be a large project, and it's difficult to see that the Vale of Glamorgan could finance such a project of itself.
Cwestiwn 11, Darren Miller.
To make a statement on maternity services for patients in North Wales, please.
Yes, Betsy Cadwaladr, University Health Board offers women from the north a full range of maternity services from birth at home or in hospital, including both midwifery and obstetric-led care and specialist facilities. And these services have been supported by the Welsh Government's £18 million investment in the Senedd, which became operational last month.
I'm very grateful for the fact that that service is available to people in my own constituency. The First Minister will be aware, however, that some people from North Wales avail themselves of maternity services in Chester, at the Countess of Chester Hospital. There's been a recent scandal there with a nurse who has been arrested on suspicion of taking the life of 8 babies. Some parents in North Wales who have lost children are obviously very concerned about that news and want to have the deaths of their children investigated. What support is the Welsh Government putting in place for parents from North Wales who have lost children and are very concerned about the nature in which they were lost and whether there is an implication for them as a result of this ongoing investigation?
Well, as the member will understand, this is an ongoing police investigation. There's not a great deal I can say about it. What I can say is that should any Welsh residents have been involved in what has happened there, we would expect the Health Board to provide support to the families affected and to seek the appropriate assurances from the NHS Trust concerned regarding any Welsh residents currently under their care.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem nesaf felly yw'r datganiad a chyhoeddiad busnes.